Y'all want this, don't you? Look at this. Look at this. Total of around like $40,000, but that's light.
Y'all seeing this? Yeah. Ooh, 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 ooh. Oh yeah. Y'all wish you had this, don't you? Look at this. Y'all wish you had this. Took the oath. All of that is like around a total of $40,000, but that's what we're here to talk about. Was all of this worth it? What were the pros and cons? I want to do a complete academic summary of my 5 years at the University of Waterloo, with all of my thoughts bundled up. If this blows up, I'd totally do like a non-academic type video on like experiences, culture, but for now I want to go over my roller coaster of an academic career. I want to be as transparent as possible and show you guys how I went from $20 an hour as an intern to making 6 figures at my full-time job. So let's start all the way at the beginning when I was just a little lad. Okay, maybe not that young. Maybe around this age. Yeah, my mom stopped cutting my hair and my beard grew out. But this is a pretty confusing age. You aren't really sure of what you like or what you're good at. I was academically pretty good, like most in my class, but deciding what to do for the next 5 years is a pretty big ask at this age. Luckily, I had my parents. That was sarcasm. I'm gonna be real with my experience, not trying to diss, but immigrant parents don't always have the greatest idea of what route to take. They try their best in guiding us, but that generation definitely has a problem in trusting our generation with decisions. My pathway was pretty much decided. It kind of felt like this scene.
मेरा बेटा engineer बनेगा.
Farhan Qureshi, BTech engineer.
And my fate was sealed.
Maybe not exactly like that, but this is how it went. My family saw a pretty rich engineer in Dubai, and he was a chemical engineer. And they were like, wait, we have a son who has the potential of being an engineer, and let's put him into chemical engineering. And he's gonna make big bucks. But yeah, that's basically how it went. And when you're growing up and you have parents that push you on a specific pathway from a really young age, you aren't really able to decide what interests you. A lot of these people overseas hear big words like AI, machine learning, big data, right? They end up sounding like
big data, machine learning, blockchain, artificial intelligence.
But they don't really understand the factors that come into play when you're pursuing these industries. These guys are from the bin and they're trying to apply knowledge from villages into a whole nother continent. One example that I can specifically relate to would be chemical engineering. There's a lack of work in populated areas when you're pursuing the chemical engineering industry. All the big name jobs where you make big money in chemical engineering are in remote areas. And that's actually a really important factor that you need to consider for your future. Are you okay with making that life change? Are you okay in moving away from these cities and living in these remote areas? Is that amount of money worth it? Is this the life that you choose? I have friends with similar experiences that are in med school, where that expectation of going to med school has parents pushing their kids continuously. And I know the intention that all these parents have come from a good place, but decisions like this aren't easy. Engineering, law, med school, they aren't easy. They take a lot of effort and persistence, sometimes luck and talent. Not everyone can do it, and that's really, really important to realize. Anyways, back to my story. I had the grades. I had one of the cleanest AIFs ever, which is basically the admission form where you just flex your high school life so that the uni accepts you. And I was looking into systems design engineering or management engineering, but my parents wanted me to go into chemical engineering, so that's what I went for. I was accepted on the day of prom, which was such a flex. And here I was, accepted into the engineering cohort, locked in for the next 5 years. I was ready to get hands-on with the chemicals, get mixing and brewing, and attempt everything that happens in Breaking Bad. Not gonna lie, I rewatched that show like 4 times over that summer just to prep for the program. I tried to hype myself as much as I could, but I ended up sounding like Jesse.
What one particular element comes to mind? Wire.
And that's kind of the image that engineering gives off. You know, working hands-on, solving impactful problems, building things using cool programs. All of this sounds so exciting. I was really hyped, but a lot of these expectations weren't met, at least initially. Not only for chemical engineering, but for a lot of the other engineering disciplines as well, like civil engineering or mechanical engineering. A lot of the course content and real-world examples don't really go hand in hand sometimes. And I'll talk about that a bit more when we start talking about internships. But here we go, September 2018, University of Waterloo. Now, how did I get this number? And yeah, the geese there do attack you. Chemical engineering, here we go. Look at this. Look at this. Okay. What the heck? What the heck is going on? So this is my schedule for first year, and it's pretty heavy. You basically have no time to breathe. First year is mostly general for a lot of the engineering disciplines. A lot of the other engineering classes take the same courses like physics, chemistry, algebra, and it's scary. It's definitely a grind. You're up studying all night. At least I was, because that's how I work. And I was going crazy. I was going so crazy that I made this. So depending on your work habits, you may just whiz through it, or you may see yourself putting in a lot of time. And what's crazy is that if you're in stream 4, you're actually going to find yourself applying to jobs and interviewing for companies while studying. So you'll see some students doing midterms in suits because of interviews right after. There's literally a week called Hell Week. Just think about that, Hell Week. This period is really crazy, and you'll find a lot of people switching programs or just dropping out. But thinking back, this definitely was one of my favorite terms. You'll meet a lot of people that you don't expect to meet. And although relationships at first may seem a bit transactional and academically focused, at least in my experience, there's a pretty cool vibe to it. Like, you're all in it together. I remember studying with a big group of friends back in 1A in a building called Grand Commons, where people would just sleep on the tables and book out rooms and just be studying there all night. It was a pretty cool vibe. But yeah, one thing that stuck with me after 1A is that things were only going to get harder, but you were only going to get better. And it's totally true. The more you work, the more you learn, the more experience you get, the better you get, both academically and when you start interning. And this brings me to the next big part of Waterloo. Everyone is thirsty for them. You'll see thousands of job apps for big companies that are hiring like one student. You'll be tailoring your resume. You'll have like 400 documents of cover letters, resumes. It's just a mess. You'll have nerve-wracking interviews at the Tatum Center where everyone is just sweating their bums wearing these suits and ties, going to classes and going to interviews, except for those software engineer freaks who just go in hoodies and sweatpants. And one important thing that I wanted to map out this early on is my mindset in first year. At that time, I thought that I just needed to make money and I'd be happy with whatever I did. I didn't really think about my work-life balance or my job at all. I thought that money was all I needed to be happy. But honestly, the co-op program really opened my eyes into seeing what I want to do and what my likes and dislikes are. So my first internship was a nightmare. The interview was so easy, and when interviews go easy and they hire in bulk, just know that you might not be in for the best time. Companies hire in bulk because they get benefits from the government, so they don't really always care about your growth. But here we go. I honestly don't even want to talk about this, but I still get nightmares thinking about me sitting at my desk just putting sticky notes on the time just so I wouldn't see it pass by so slowly. From the commute to the lack of time that I had for myself, it was honestly a mess and a really important reality check for me. So I worked at HTS Engineering, and for full transparency, I was making $20 an hour for my first co-op. The company was essentially like a block in the middle of nowhere, right next to Jane and Finch. Yeah, that Jane and Finch. And my first impression when I saw the building was that this is pretty underwhelming. Like, I expected a job more tailored to my program. I expected lab coats, you know, machinery, maybe some Erlenmeyer flasks, I don't know. But it was honestly just a normal office with desks and people on phones selling engineering equipment. I was pretty dumb because the role was engineering sales assistant, but I don't know, I just expected more at that time. So I was responsible for looking through engineering drawings, finding heaters, coolers, refrigerators, bananas. I actually don't even know, to be honest. And honestly, I sucked at the job, and I blame myself more than my manager, because I honestly just wasn't passionate about it. And once the managers kind of saw that, they just started to focus on themselves. But yeah, the job was essentially just looking through engineering drawings, quoting, bidding, setting prices for the engineering equipment. Honestly, it wasn't anything hands-on, which kind of bothered me. And don't even get me started on the commute. I get up at like 6 a.m., you know, 2-hour commute there, 2-hour commute back. I honestly only had like 3 hours left for myself. The only thing that made it bearable was chilling with the other co-ops, to be honest, at lunchtime, which was like 30 minutes. But in my head, I was like, is this gonna be my life? Am I gonna be working like this as a chemical engineer after graduation? Would I be stuck in a place like this? All of a sudden, that mentality that I had about not caring about what you do and just making money, it just vanished. My attitude before this job was like, oh, who needs to have fun at work? You know, I'll just make this money and I'm good. Why would a work environment really matter? But work that you do that you don't enjoy is so draining. And I think this was the lowest I've ever been. During my time at HTS, I open up LinkedIn and I see all my friends at like Google, Microsoft, Deloitte, big banks living it up downtown Toronto. The tech lifestyle really seduced me. I spoke to a couple of friends who only mentioned good things about their software engineering roles. And that's when I decided to change my lifestyle. There I was on Udemy grinding certification after certification. In those 3 hours that I had after the commute, I would just do certifications on Python, machine learning, AI, anything coding related, anything to get me out of this box of a building that I was in. And now look, I've always been into tech. I love computers. I love video games. And I've been wanting to code since I watched The Social Network. But without the right resources and guidance, I just didn't know what to do at the time. And you aren't really able to understand the power of coding until you do an internship or actually get some work experience. After my first internship, I was just trying to learn all this just because I saw the pay and the freedom that these engineers had. And then we hit 1B right after my first internship. And that's the one thing about Waterloo, you get no summers. So I get back to university and I'm split up from all my friends that I made in 1A because of our stream difference. And I essentially just grinded through it. It's definitely easier than the first term, but this one is still pretty heavy. This term was annoying because all my high school friends were back in Mississauga just living it up during summer, and I was here in the mustiest dorm room ever. And to make matters worse, I got the timing wrong for my last exam and I missed it. But yeah, I basically became like a meme after that. And once again, during 1B, we had job interviews, and the grind for that is totally different. You know, shortlisting jobs, tailoring your resume, applying, interviewing. But this time I was a bit more selective in what I was applying to. I tried to look for jobs that implemented coding into something chemical engineering related. I landed an interview for PepsiCo, which had me pretty excited because companies like Mondelez, Pepsi, Tesla, Suncor, honestly, they kind of feel like the California of chemical engineering. Maybe not PepsiCo as much, but definitely the other ones. And with this interview, I learned that interviews are hard, especially when you're just memorizing off of a script, because that's what I would do. I would just write down a bunch of things on Word and just memorize it, hoping that the interviewer would ask me those questions. But she just looked into my soul and like, I just totally blanked out and it was the worst interview ever. But I somehow still finessed the job and I got it. I learned that making a script for the interview was not the way to go. And I'll share how I do my interviews now later on in the video. But essentially, the more experience you get, the more confident you are in talking about your skills and experiences. And the more you have to talk about, which is a great perk of the co-op program. And now we come to PepsiCo, a better sized building in a safer area. But this co-op honestly changed my life and taught me a lot. Here I met some amazing other student interns that I'm still tight with to this day. We went through some hilarious moments because everything was so chaotic.
Oh, it's the man. Oh, guess it. What is it? Starbucks
So essentially my role was supply chain co-op. I was making $24 an hour for this co-op term, and I would be working with a lot of process and chemical engineers in the manufacturing plant. This was actually really cool. They had massive machines, massive tanks, massive operators. But what surprised me the most is that as an intern, you're not allowed to touch anything. Your job is actually dependent on talking to the line operators and getting them to do what you want. And this is kind of where the fun began, because line operators have been there for 25 plus years and they do not want to take orders from a 19-year-old. My first day I was cussed off and I was just shook for like the rest of the day. And with this job, I learned that engineering could be more people-oriented than you think. Here, communication was key. The trick of this job was to get to know the operators, to do favors for them, and to understand how they feel about what they're doing, looking for their input and actually talking to them. So once you build that credit with these operators, they come back and they help you. So it was a really satisfying feeling getting tight with these operators by the end of the term. So all in all, a great experience once I learned how to talk to them and communicate. But honestly, in terms of the work-life balance, it wasn't really for me. We had to get up at 4 a.m. sometimes to take care of down days where the whole manufacturing line was closed off and we'd have to go and support cleaning and all these processes. But getting up at 4 a.m. honestly just wasn't for me. And so after every day at work, I continued my software conquest, got a couple more certifications. And then by January 2020, I was back in school. That's right, 2020, the big year. By this point, academics got pretty static and I honestly wasn't really interested in the course content, so I was just grinding through it. But the next part of the story brings me to a very important topic called networking. Some people get insane opportunities just because they know a guy that knows a guy.
Do you know anyone that has worked at Google?
Let's just say I know a guy who knows a guy who knows another guy.
This happens at Waterloo to an annoying extent. If a person comes up to you, you don't even know if they want to be your friend or if they just want to network. People are at parties getting drunk, just networking. It's kind of crazy. It isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like you kind of lose the genuineness of an interaction when you're just there for networking. You kind of lose that genuineness when the friendship becomes a bit transactional. Anyways, here I am, early 2020, applying to jobs that fit into like what my interests are and then what chemical engineering is, still trying to find a middle ground there. And then on one bus ride back to Mississauga, my city, the best city ever, a guy that replies to my stories sits next to me. I don't really know him as well, but we get to talking, and he's a software engineer at Deloitte. He's heading to Saga too, so he must be a really sick guy. So I talk to him about some tips and ask him for some guidance on what route to choose. And we talk over the bus ride, and yeah, I don't see him for a bit after that. And then the big bad happens, COVID hits, all these offers are rescinded. I lose my offer at this company called Praxair. People are wearing masks, toilet paper is getting stolen, the world is on fire. It was a pretty unreal experience. I remember calling my friends at Western and York and just praying that Waterloo closes down so we can just go home and chill. But here we are, sitting jobless at my desk, just playing video games where my phone rings. It's the same dude from the bus. And he tells me that he's consulting for a startup. He offers me a remote position as a back-end engineer, which was an unpaid position, but honestly, I didn't have a job and I wanted that experience, so I went for it. Plus, remote work during a pandemic was honestly the way to go. So I took the job, and this really shows you how far networking can get you. And essentially, this was life-changing. It was one of the best summers I've ever had. Remote work, learning software engineering, flexible work hours, working in the back end. I had so much time during the day to bike with my friends, hang out, play video games, get ice cream. It was actually one of the best summers ever. In terms of the work, I was working at a startup called Personify AI, which is now called Pronti AI. It's essentially a digital closet where people take pictures of their clothes and the app stores it for you in this closet and then uses machine learning algorithms to recommend outfits based on the weather, based on mood, and other factors. We created the entire backend system from scratch. It was the most satisfying thing ever. Remember me talking about impactful work? This actually felt like my work was impactful, and it felt like I was actually creating value. The way the industry was designed felt so familiar. It felt like a video game, where there's tickets and story points for each task or quest as I saw it. And I really fell in love with the workflow. Remote work gave me so much time to do the things that I love, and I think this 4-month duration was where I learned what I really wanted to do. And so after this co-op term, the journey continues with school from home, which honestly was a blessing for me because I wasn't really interested in the content, so I was just grinding through it. And so the pandemic continued, the same job application process continued. By this point, you're pretty used to it. Dare I say, even good at it. Tailoring resumes, applying to jobs, doing interviews. And by third year, you should have way more options because companies actually prefer hiring third and fourth years. So this is where I tried to take bigger steps in the industry, now that I knew what I wanted to do. And here I landed a job at RBC, and I worked under their machine learning institute called Borealis AI as a data engineer. Sounds very cool. My title was machine learning software engineer, and you already know my family was drooling at this title. But if this job taught me anything, it was that I want to run far away from machine learning and data engineering and AI. It taught me that software engineering is a very, very big field, and you can do so many things working in this industry. You can work on a product, you can work as a DevOps eng, a data eng, a full stack eng, an infrastructure eng, an ML and AI. So finding that niche or area that I'm interested in was my next focus. It was a pretty interesting discovery for me. So at Pronti AI, I was working on a pretty cool user-facing product. But at Borealis AI, I was mostly working on data scraping, creating pipelines, working with infrastructure. Honestly, it wasn't really my thing. And the pay was $27 an hour, so like a $3 bump from my last co-op, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I honestly learned that ML and AI wasn't the vibe for me. And I noticed that a lot of the people that I was working with at Borealis AI were either masters or PhD students. So in order to really progress in this industry, you really need to do graduate studies. Or there's a high chance that you end up sounding like this.
Big data, machine learning, blockchain, artificial intelligence.
So after this co-op finished, pretty underwhelming, I moved on to my next co-op at Epoch, the last co-op. Now this co-op was a banger. Here I worked as a full stack software engineer on another user-facing product because I really enjoyed working on a user-facing product at Personify AI. The coolest part about this was that the CEO at Personify AI knew the CEO at Epoch, and they both talked and I got a pretty good referral. So I stepped into the role with a pretty good reputation. So here I was initially paid $34 an hour for the first 4 months, and I was able to negotiate a $42 per hour salary for the next 4 months. And this co-op was it. I realized that I loved startup culture. Personify was a startup, and so was this. I wrote the most code that I'd ever written at this co-op. But to specify what I loved about the job, the main thing that made a difference to me was the impact of my work. I was out here creating features that people at Reddit, Datadog, Instacart would all use and appreciate. It was very, very fulfilling. And that's a lot of growth for my first co-op when I didn't even know what I wanted to do. Another very important point that made a difference to me was the lack of restrictions at a startup. So when I was working at Borealis AI, to make even one push or to write even a bit of code, I had to go through a multitude of permissions. It's really annoying, but at a startup, you're given a lot of freedom. So it looked like I really found my place. And what's even better is that I was able to get a full-time offer a whole year before graduation. So you already know, I was cruising through my last year. I felt very accomplished. Starting off as a chemical engineer who hated his path and honestly was very confused, I was able to shape this entire opportunity into something that I wanted. And I think that's a very big plus of Waterloo. You're able to shape these experiences into what you want them to be, especially in the co-op program. And so for my full-time offer, I was able to negotiate $100,000 starting salary. I actually created a PowerPoint and pitched it to my CEO. And as a side note, PowerPoints are a very powerful tool in interviews and negotiations like these. There's a video that I refer to when negotiating my salary. I'll link that in the description. But essentially, I showed the CEO of the company my contributions, my experience, the current landscape, current average salaries, and essentially it was just me trying to convince her as to why I deserve the salary. So she gave me two options. She gave me one option where I got more stock options and less cash, and another offer where I got more cash and less stock options. And at this point in my life, I honestly don't really need stock options because you need to like wait 4 years for them to get vested in order for them to be actually usable. So I went for the cash heavy option and I was able to start with 6 figures. And then I just cruised through my final year and now I'm here Working from home. I have a really nice work-life balance. I'm able to work out, play soccer, chill with my friends, get ice cream, go to the Drake concert, go to Portugal, bought myself a pretty sweet triple monitor setup, and I got to start this YouTube channel with all the time that I have. So I'd say it worked out pretty well. In terms of a review of the actual program, I personally hated it. Aside from my own interest, most of the professors didn't really seem helpful at all. Maybe only one or two really knew what they were doing. The content was very dry and very boring. And honestly, a lot of it just felt like fluff. And now, obviously, there's cases where students use the content that they learn in class. I feel like the content that we learn in chemical engineering is more like a building block for postgraduate studies, for like a PhD or master's. That's just how I see bio and chem heavy programs. They aren't always great choices for people that want to go into the industry right away. But did my parents win this round of life? Is this something that they get to hold over my head for the rest of their life? Definitely not. Sorry, not in my opinion. Honestly, at a point, I felt like my potential was hindered. But if you are in the same position that I was in, just know that you have the power to make changes in your own life. So don't be discouraged. You've seen this video, so you have to be successful. But now objectively, was the University of Waterloo worth it? Now that you guys have all the internship and academic knowledge, I have to say the internship program at Waterloo is top notch. And although other universities do have internship programs, not all of them have it integrated into the specific program, which is a pretty big plus for Waterloo. And to bring some stats into the picture, our class stats had about 60% of students with jobs ready for post-graduation, with about 17% of students going to graduate school. And the salaries weren't as bad as I expected too. But the real stats that you guys are probably here for are the superlatives. Honestly, the only thing that made this program worth it was winning these two categories. Look at that, class clown and best beard. I swear this is worth more to me than the entire degree. I didn't even go to class and I was still class clown. Just think about the power I have. And so to sum it up, my main takeaways from the last 5 years would probably be these points. Be open to change. Remember my mindset from 1A about my work-life balance and just wanting to work without thinking about what I'm passionate about? Things work out in really weird ways sometimes. Like think about the guy that I met on the bus. So talk, network, try and get out of your comfort zone. And if you see something, go and get it. Number 2, focus a lot of your energy on internships. In most cases, it'll take you way further than your course content. Next, focus on your own journey. You're going to be paired up with people that are getting jobs at Google, Deloitte, all these big companies in probably their first year. So focus on yourself and look at your strengths and don't compare yourself to others. So trust the journey and try and learn as much as you can from other people, but don't compare yourself. And yeah, just land a 6-figure job after graduation. It's not that hard. And yeah, I think I've covered up pretty much all of the important academic stuff. I didn't even get to dig into university life or culture, but I feel like that's for another video. Waterloo definitely had its moments, especially in first year and fourth year, but honestly, I didn't like it that much. Again, for another video. So the main advice I can give to new undergrads is basically what I've been saying this entire video. This experience is what you make it. For the Waterloo alumni watching this, let me know how your experience went in the comments. And for those new frosh, let me know how you're feeling about this journey. Honestly, I'm so happy to be out. I kind of don't even want to read your comments because I don't want to go back to that school. But with that, I am out. I want to flex this ring one more time. Wait, let me see if I can get a cool transition with the ring.